Today, Ryan and I have a preview for you for a game called Journeys Afar, the Ketsueki. This one is a big open world sort of sandbox adventure game. Think along the lines of maybe some Red Raven style games, maybe some of the old FFG games. More recently, a little like Vantage maybe, but it's an open world sandbox set in a wildly whimsical fantasy world for sure.
Yeah, well, worlds, honestly.
That's
Because
true.
that's kind of the whole concept of the game is it takes place across these almost like multi-dimensional worlds. And you can see, we've picked 3 here. In a 2-player game, you use 3, but with up to 4 players, each player is going to choose their own world. And these worlds, it's kind of like your own private play space, but it is shared amongst all the players. You can travel to other worlds, which I think is like a huge crux of what you're doing in the game.
Yeah, in fact, it becomes important for some of your journeys to actually travel to some of the other worlds. But each of those worlds is going to come with a character too. These characters are associated with the world, so it's kind of a package deal when you're setting the game up. Now, what's not part of a package deal are the journeys that those characters might go on. Each character is going to have, I think, up to about 3 different journeys, and each of those journeys has 3 chapters. These kind of effectively serve as your guiding light for what you're wanting to do, because otherwise it is an open world, because you can get sidetracked and you can just go, oh, this is fun, or I found a little engine here where I can score some points, potentially trigger the end of the game. But when all else fails, you can look down at your journey and look at your current chapter and say, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? Well, in this one, it says, stretch your legs, travel to or from the Great Grove and the Henge in Memori in a single turn. So I'm starting in Memori, and I just need to do that. If I've achieved that in a single turn, I'm able to put a marker on there and go to the next thing. When you get through these chapters, they're going to kind of move on to the next one. The next one might say, okay, now you want to go to a different world or do some different things. Getting a little bit more interesting, revealing story along the way, and potentially even injecting some new elements into the game from like a reserved deck of cards.
Yeah, and that's the thing is this game is very variable. Everything that you see in front of us is determined by the 3 worlds that we've chosen. So we talked about how it affects your player with your, I don't know if you mentioned the characters have asymmetric powers as well.
No.
So they have asymmetric powers, your journey is different, but each of the worlds is going to introduce and inject some new mechanics. This could be in the form of maybe mini games or new locations you can visit, but also everything else that you see up here is determined by these 3. You're going to shuffle these decks together. The market is made up of cards from these worlds. The spirits that you can buy are made up from these worlds. The encounters that you can encounter are made up from these worlds. And even the Ronin that you fight are from these worlds. And then we have these 3 kind of stacks out that won't even be in play at all if these worlds weren't chosen.
Yeah, they're specific to sort of some of the new mechanics that those worlds inject into the game. I do want to take a point here to mention this encounter deck in and of itself is very thick. Like, this is the encounter deck for this setup. When we've played this once before, the encounter deck was equally large, and I think we got through less than half of it.
Oh yeah, like maybe a quarter of it, yeah.
And these are all unique to these worlds. They have flavor and story relative to what's happening in these worlds, maybe what's happening with your character, things like that, so that you can kind of really relate to it. And that's one of the other things I want to mention. The narrative in this probably kind of is revealed more in a lore sort of way, in a world building sort of way, and less so in a storytelling. I mean, there is stories being told, there's chapters to your journey, but it's the flavor of this world that you really lets your kind of imagine start to take over, start to fill in the blanks, which is really kind of the most efficient and best way a narrative can be presented, I think.
Well, yeah, and that narrative is unfolding primarily, I think, through the encounter deck and through the journeys that you're going on. But each of these worlds has something going on. Like, for example, I have Hansha here, and my character is like a porcelain doll that's come to life.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of this world is that you're collecting glass, and you can use this glass, you could take it to the forge, and you can build some unique items that you'll never be able to build if you can't. And also, it introduces this whole new mechanic of glass, this whole new resource that you can gain. But a lot of the encounter cards and things you're doing are interacting with these people and things that are like made of glass, and like this world of like people that are in like trapped in that state. And it's really interesting to kind of see some of that background detail unfold mostly through the encounter cards. So if you're playing this faction again, you're going to maybe get some encounter cards and some new flavor for that world that you didn't have last time you used it.
Yeah, and it makes it kind of special too. When you go into those encounters, all of them are fun and interesting, even if they're not associated with your world. But when you've kind of if you allow yourself to sort of get into the character and to get into the world that the character is from, when you get an encounter card that's relevant to your world, and they're pretty clear, right? A lot of them are like, oh, I bet that's related to
Well,
mine.
they're marked on the cards too, so you
they
can
are
sort
marked.
them. Yes.
But it really lets you get into the sort of world that you're from. Not to mention, as the game unfolds, start to appreciate some of the other things that are going on in the other worlds. This other world here that we selected sort of as the third world in a 2-player game has this maze. It's a location you can interact with. And that should be said. A lot of the worlds have a location that's specific to some of the mechanics. In this case, you go to this maze, and if you've done that, someone else is going to take this maze deck, and you're going to say left or right. And then they'll flip the card, and there's numbers at the top of those. There's potentially some rewards. This one's a booby trap, so you have to suffer some of these things. But you want to basically push your luck and keep going or not. Because if I did this and I said right, that's 0. That's good. You don't want numbers. And then if I said right again, oh, now it's 1. So you stack the card like this. Now if I said left, it's another 0. So you'd stagger like that. And at a certain point, if you've accumulated too much of a sum, you're going to bust. So then you won't have successfully gotten through that.
And then the last one we're using is Memory over here, which brings this whole new deck. And this actually, it brings in these ancients, but there's several different ancients that you can choose from.
Yeah.
Their whole goal is like worshiping this ancient. A lot of the stuff that's happening in the world involves this ancient. You're wanting to harvest materials and bring them back to this ancient and give an offering. And again, like just because the maze is on this board and the ancients on this board and the forge is on this board, you will unlock the ability throughout the game to start traveling. I think that's where the Journeys Afar comes into play. Everybody starts with these gate tokens like David is flipping right now. And one of them is actually a portal to another world. If you manage to discover that portal, move onto that portal, you can transport yourself to the other world and start interacting with their things. Now, that matters for your journeys.
Yeah.
It matters for maybe wanting to go and interact with some of the stuff that they're doing specially. But you also have a few other people that are kind of traveling around the world. One is this Ronin, who can bounce from world to world based on this Ronin card here. Again, a deck that's made up from the 3 different worlds.
Yes.
You've got specific Ronin. You can fight these as a way to kind of earn rewards and points. And then you have these travelers, which are going to be moving around the worlds as well.
Yeah, these travelers represent these cards here. You're going to go there to interact with that card and do what it says, and then that traveler is going to travel and move to another place in the worlds, across the world, so they don't just stay stagnant. The interesting thing about these worlds are they're going to have some mechanics, some things like this where you're like, oh, I want to visit that traveler. Oh, he's not in my world. And then if you do visit him and you think maybe another player might want to visit him for one reason or another, you might not put it on the same world that they're currently on. Sure. You could position that somewhere else, but you do have to put it on a different world. Not to mention the locations, like we alluded to, the maze. The location here is where you can go and sort of like interact with the ancient. Those are going to be things where when you set the game up, players are going to be like, oh, well, that seems fun. Someone does the maze, and they're like, oh, what do I need to do the maze? Well, you need to travel to this world and do it. So it starts to sort of incentivize people to do those things, not to mention the fact that the game itself gives you an incentive, mainly in the journeys, to do that. I think a lot of the second chapters in the journeys will often include a go to at least one of the other worlds in the game to interact with it, and then maybe the next step is go to the other world that's in the game.
Yeah, and all this is kind of powered by this action system. They call it effort. At the start of the game, everyone is going to start with 6 effort that you can spend on your turn. And effort is the currency by which you do all of your actions in the game. Now, there are some things you can do to gain more effort. There are also some things that you could do, often prices you have to pay, that will have you exhaust effort, which means you're taking less actions. But in general, it's pretty simple. Each cube that you spend equates 1 action. And that's generally moving around your board. It's interacting with the things that are on the board. So each one of these locations that's marked on the map in these little black squares you're seeing on camera right now, each one of these is a location. And most of the worlds are going to have the same basic like 4 locations plus their special one. These let you go to the market and buy cards. They let you go to the mine and get resources. There's a lot of things you can do with the goal of kind of building out this tableau that is going to help you kind of perform the rest of the actions in the game.
Yeah, a lot of those basic locations, like Ryan just said, it serves the the means by which you're going to get things done. A lot of resource collecting, a lot of like, if you think, oh, I want some of these market cards, because you can truly start to build a tableau or an engine around your player board. Because the market cards, you can buy and hold as many of those as you want, but you need to go to those locations to get them. It's likewise with the spirits that are going to go above your board. And you can truly get some combinations of cards because, again, reminder, what we said, these cards are made up from these worlds. So there's going to have some very specific synergies between cards. So if you get the right combination, you're going to sort of create some situations where you're like, you know what? I'm actually potentially going to score more points by kind of like going down this road with this little engine I have, as opposed to like going further on my journey. Now, there's some give and take there because there's some real points to be scored by going through this journey. But when we played, I found myself
you barely did your journey at all.
I didn't do my journey as much as everyone else, but I think that's a really interesting option so that it doesn't feel like it's the same sort of path that everyone's taking.
Well, yeah, and when you use these factions together, like we're using 3 different factions, and we're building up a different market. And next time you play, there might have been like a really good combo that you used, but that combo might not be in the game if you're not using those exact same locations. And even if it is, those cards have to come up. But you might think, okay, well, I'm just going to buy all the cards or interact with all the spirits that are my color, that match my world. But that's not necessarily how you want to do it, because you might find yourself with the playing from this world, but you're getting a lot of glass. So you're coming over here and spending a lot of money to buy these forge cards. And then those forge cards might give you a specific ability that you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to try to do this more often. And then those spirits that David mentioned, a lot of those have scoring opportunities as well. So if you find yourself able to get one and it scores a particular thing, you're probably going to want to do that particular thing.
Yeah, and before we move on from scoring, another thing that comes up are these quests. You're going to get quests from, again, one of the locations, the tea house.
Yeah.
And you're going to get these quests, and they are absolutely going to, again, yet dangle another carrot of like, maybe you want to do this to score some points. So that's another route that you can take in terms of like really trying to find different ways of scoring your points. The last thing I want to talk about in some length are these encounters. The encounter cards we mentioned earlier, at the end of every turn, effectively, unless you've done something on your journey, someone's going to read an encounter card to you. And again, these encounters are populated from the world. So you might get one from yours, you might get one from another one. But someone reads this, and this is along the lines of a lot of these sorts of games with open world. This is going to give you a lot of story, a lot of flavor, and a lot of world building. But it's also going to give you an option.
Yeah.
Usually you're making a decision. So someone lays it out in front of you, and then you choose, and then you're going to get some things that might trigger some things. It's like The Witcher Old World, or a lot of games like that, where a lot of that narrative really comes out.
That a winner with those crossroads cards. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's also, this is probably where most of the humor in the game comes. And I will say this, and we should have said this from the get-go.
You called it whimsical.
It is whimsical, but what I was going to say is, Travis Chance, the designer of this game, he's a friend of the channel. He lives here locally to us. So take everything we say with a grain of salt. And I don't want to inflate his ego, but this is a pretty funny game. Like, there's a lot of fun to be had. I don't want to spoil a lot of what's going on, but I will tell you this. There's a surprising amount of opportunities to eat things in the game as one of your options. And when you least expect it, it might say, do you want to help them? Do you want to give them money? Do you want to eat them?
We are all animals.
It is an interesting option, but it's very funny, and that's what brings about the sort of like they've said themselves that they're kind of inspired by Studio Ghibli and like Adventure Time and things like that. I definitely feel those inspirations, particularly Adventure Time, with that sort of like slightly dark but whimsical humor.
Well, yeah, and Ghibli too, with like some of the like the look of the game, the look of some of these worlds definitely feels like it could come out of one of their movies.
Oh, and in fact, there's even a world that we don't have here on the table that is literally very Howl's Moving Castle.
Oh, that castle that moves around the board.
There's literally a big thing that moves around the board that is effectively like the castle.
You can do all of this stuff by spending your action cubes. There's really no limit. You can do the same action a bunch of times. You can go to a place and you can interact with it a bunch of times. You can even use your effort to add more dice to combat when you're fighting these Ronin that move across the map. You can add more dice, or you can use them for skill checks, which some of the encounters might have you roll skill checks. We didn't even talk about like the fact that there's a light RPG element to this. You have 3 stats: influence, strength, and wisdom that you're leveling up throughout the game. They're going to help you in fighting. They're going to help you in some of the skill checks and the encounters. oftentimes just helping you to get better rewards.
Yes.
A lot of things will say, hey, roll these dice and you're going to look and see how well you did. They do have a mechanic. There's this other currency called fate that you can accrue throughout the game that can help you like mitigate some of these dice rolls. You can stack up a ton of fate and like use them to re-roll. But like the spirits, a lot of them require fate as a cost. The ancients, if they're on the table, a lot of them want you to bring fate to them. So again, in that sandbox nature, they give you a lot of resources and a lot of different ways to spend them. And then you kind of decide how you want to play the game. How do you want to go about exploring these different worlds? What combinations for points are you finding?
Yeah, this is truly a sandbox type of experience. If you like games similar to the ones we've already mentioned, I think Journeys Afar will be the kind of game you'll enjoy. I would say, even compared to a lot of those, The Witcher Old World, I think, did a good job of balancing sort of narrative and gameplay. I think this one does as well. This one definitely feels like more of an adventure in that respect, in terms of like choose your own adventure, if you will, especially with those encounters. But a lot of the gameplay that you can get from the tableau building is pretty amazing. Or, like we said earlier, someone might not do much of that at all and really just find kind of like one narrow path or follow along their journey.
Well, and speaking of those narrow paths and the journeys, I do want to say this. The game also gives you 2 ways to win. So that's something you got to think about when you're trying to play the game as well. If somebody hits 15 points, the game ends, and they probably will win. If there is some in-game scoring, there's not a ton of in-game scoring. If you're significantly ahead when you hit 15 points, you might win. But the other way you can end the game is if somebody completes their journey. And every time you complete your journey, you're getting massive points for every level of the journey. So again, if you are working, somebody might be really ahead in points while another person's working on completing their journey. They complete the last couple steps of their journey, they could easily win the game even if they were far behind on points. So you're kind of deciding, do you want to go that engine building route and you're getting a lot of points from triggering a lot of things? Or are you just kind of focused on going through your journey and getting points that way? Either way, I think, is a viable path to victory.
Yeah, so if you haven't figured it out yet, big sandbox game, variable paths to victory. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, go check out their campaign page or get down in the comments below and ask us whatever you want. We'll try to answer what we can. If you have any questions about some of the other worlds, we'll look those up and give you some information on those too. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.